and our host is Yannick Reekmans, and the topic is Supercharge your adaptive cards with cards for Power Apps. Sounds interesting.
Let's hope it is. So good evening, everyone. I hope you had a great conference already. Saw some amazing sessions. So I hope I can continue this with my topic on cards for Power Apps. As I said in the introduction before the session started, I've done this session before a year ago, and let's see if things have been changed over the course of the year. First of all, this is me. I'm Yannick Reekmans. I'm a cloud solution architect at Qubix in Belgium. I love doing development still, unfortunately moving more and more towards management tasks lately. But if I get a chance, I'll do my own development work still. I blog. It's been, well, I used to say it's been a while, but over the last 3 weeks, I've blogged 4 times, which is about as much as I did the whole 2023. So there's new stuff happening on my blog as well. Feel free to check it out. I'm usually most active on Twitter, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. If you have any questions, that's the way to find me. Much easier to find me through Twitter and LinkedIn than to send me an email. It will get lost in my big inbox. The agenda for today. So cards, what are they? Why should you care? What can they do and how do they work? And some demos. So let's walk through and get started. First of all, cards or adaptive cards. What are they and why should you care? And I start first with adaptive cards because cards for Power Apps is an extension on top of adaptive cards. First of all, adaptive cards. They are platform agnostic snippets of UI. They are created in JSON, and it's an open standard that can be exchanged between apps and services. So it describes the UI. It is a way to help you design and integrate lightweight UI in all major platforms and frameworks. So it allows you to create a consistent UI for small applications or small interfaces within a bigger ecosystem. And when they are delivered to a specific application, they are transformed into native UI, and they look and feel as if they belong in that specific application. I have a video of that shows this. It's an old one, but it still explains it very easily. You see here a chatbot, an interaction, and it shows some cards after they've been set up. You describe them with the JSON structure on how they look and feel. And then they are shown inside all the different platforms, like iOS, Android, HTML, or Windows. Even in Windows notifications, you can have them. So this is a way for small cards, small interfaces to show up in specific environments. And you can see as well that they look and feel different depending on where they are shown. So if they are shown in Skype or in the web, it shows different than when they are on Android in an orange application, for example, or on Windows when they are in a dark mode Windows setup. Now, to do adaptive cards, it's rather easy. You don't need very much architecture and infrastructure when you use adaptive cards inside Microsoft Teams or want to use it inside Microsoft Teams. So the easiest way for you to show an adaptive card in Teams is to create a Power Automate flow and send that adaptive card JSON to Microsoft Teams. There's an action for that. You send the card to the Teams bot, and it will be displaying that card inside a chat, a channel, a group chat, or anywhere there is a conversation happening, essentially. So you can send that easily in there. You have to build the card up front, of course. You can use the card builder on the web to create a JSON, but once the card is there, you can very easily send it with Power Automate Flow. You do not need anything specific in architecture to set up except for the Power Automate Flow. This is your responsibility. You create the card or the UI with the data in there, and you send it through Power Automate. That's the only responsibility that the maker has, to send that adaptive card into Teams. On the side of Microsoft Teams, there already is an application for Power Automate that lives inside Teams, and that's the one that will be posting the message inside the Teams channel or chat and that will render the card, essentially. Adaptive cards have certain pros and cons. First, the pros. They're platform agnostic and standardized. It's an open standard that everyone has to adhere to when they want to use adaptive cards. They are widely integrated in different Microsoft products. You can use adaptive cards in Teams, in Outlook, in Bot Framework, currently in Copilot, and many other ways of presenting UI. They are customizable and visually appealing, and they're easy to build because you do not have to think about the styling of it. You just have to think about the structure of it. Where do I want stuff to go in that card? Because on the other hand, it will use that in that native space to render it look and feel in that native space. If it goes in Teams, it looks different than when it goes, or when it goes in Teams in dark mode, it looks different than when it goes in Teams in white mode or light mode. And it will render it in a way that works for that environment. And it provides a consistent experience across hosts, platforms, and devices. So you do not have to worry about that. There are some downsides to it as well, because there's limited support across application versions. And it's connected to the evolving standards and updates, because not every application or every system supports adaptive cards, and not every application and every system supports the same version of adaptive cards. Adaptive cards come in different versions like 1.4, 1.5, maybe more, and it all depends on the support that the application or the system has for that specific version to see if you can use the newer features of the newer standards. And it's not always super clear which version of adaptive cards are supported in which system and application. There is potentially a bit of a learning curve, because they say it's low code and JSON is not code. That's what they say, but it sure as hell looks a lot like code. You have to do it in, well, you don't have to, but it's easier in Visual Studio Code. And as soon as there's code in the name of the application, I'd say it's code. There's a potential downside on performance, because it's taking the JSON and has to render the UI for you. So in a heavy loaded system or a heavy loaded application with lots of cards and lots of information, potentially the performance of that application could be impacted negatively when using adaptive cards. And standard adaptive cards only work with static data. Of course, you can use the dynamic data in Power Automate flow to inject your data inside the JSON, but as soon as it's posted in Teams, it will stay that data. It will not update, it will not fetch that information from somewhere else. So that's less interesting. Now, of course, there's this evolution of adaptive cards, which I like to call interactive adaptive cards. And they can change appearance and behavior based on user interaction, which means when there are buttons on there and if you have input or anything, the card itself will be updated and will be rendered differently. This will provide a more interactive and engaging experience to your end users, and also a more up-to-date experience to your end users. And they will like it more. All the data in there will be much more interactive or up-to-date. And it will give you the ability to do dynamic real-time information and content. It will update every time that the user, I don't know, refreshes a page or refreshes the card itself, and it will get all that data on the fly. Now, some of those examples, and they come from the website of adaptive cards, are things like setting a due date on a task, or showing flight information, or ordering forms, etc., etc. It gives you buttons or input fields or something like that, so that you can put some data inside the adaptive card and then place the order, or you can approve or reject a specific expense approval. Something like that is as well with the built-in approval system of Power Automate. It will also render adaptive cards in Outlook and in Teams potentially, or any place where you want to expose them. And you can do that interaction inside the place where the adaptive card is rendered. These are interactive adaptive cards, and they require a lot more work to build there. Looking at that, you need a much bigger architecture and infrastructure, to create cards like this. First of all, the user will open Teams, will send an interaction or a request through the Teams bot, or anyway, to the bot service. The bot service will then authenticate and authorize with Azure Active Directory, will then provide a token. With that token, will call your backend service that you have to build. It's your custom bot code, which will then respond with an adaptive card JSON, which will then be passed through the bot service and responded inside Teams. And all of this is the responsibility of the maker. But in this case, it's not something a maker can build. It's more something that a pro developer has to create. Of course, there are abstractions and things like Power Virtual Agents and all of that build stuff like this for you. But if you want full control and you want to create your own bot logic that responds with an adaptive card JSON, you will need to build all of these things yourself. You will have to register your bot. You will have to create a Teams application. You will have to make sure that you do the app registration in Azure Active Directory or in Entra ID, what it's called lately. And you have to create your backend system, web service, that will do all the processing and will return the proper adaptive card JSON to render in Teams. As you can see, this is lots more work for the pro developer to create, but there's also way more operational resources that have to be kept running throughout the life cycle of this Teams app that you have to maintain, update, potentially bug fix. Because all of this is essentially your responsibility at that point. It has some advantages and disadvantages, starting with the good things. All of these interactive adaptive cards create higher user engagement because all of the stuff is updated with real-time information. You can make sure that you request input from your user at the time where they see the adaptive card, and it will have the most up-to-date information available coming from your backend system. They're still customizable and visually appealing, of course, that doesn't change, and they're still consistent across host, platform, and devices. So that is not a change compared to static normal adaptive cards, but additionally it goes with the higher user engagement and the more real-time information update. Now the downsides, they're complex and technically challenging. Depends on if your developer needs a technical challenge, of course, or likes a technical challenge, but it has to be built and it has to be supported. There's higher maintenance and tech debt that you have to take into account. And all of your backend infrastructure most likely requires at least a pro code, pro developer, and potentially even a system administrator to take care of all of this. Again, limited support across app versions and performance are a thing that doesn't change, and especially when calling a backend service, performance might be more negatively impacted as well if your service is not that responsive or not that fast in processing all the input. Which brings us, going fast, to cards for Power Apps. They are micro applications with enterprise data and workflows. So cards for Power Apps are essentially something that's created within Power Platform, and they are mini Canvas app applications, essentially. They provide an engaging experience with interactive and lightweight UI elements. You know those. If you have ever built a Canvas app in Power Platform, you can build cards for Power Apps as well, with the caveats that I will share later. And they can add business logic with Power Effect, and they can use Power Platform connectors to connect with data. Now, the biggest caveat that I will provide with all of this that's on the screen now is that this is the marketing message that Microsoft delivers. When you Google what cards for Power Apps are, in the introduction and in the announcement blog post, this is all the stuff that you find. I'll show you later how it looks in reality at this point. But the premise is good, so it sounds interesting, right? As a result, this is a screenshot that they create. There's an interactive card coming from Power Apps, which will show a title, a specific account that's coming from Dynamics 365, the budget, and if you have to enter the estimated shipping date, and then you can confirm it. It will update this in Dynamics 365, and it will potentially notify the customer. But the input and all the data is fetched dynamically from Dynamics, or sales or customer service, and it's shown on screen in Teams, and you can provide an estimated shipping date, which will then update the record in or row in Dynamics or Power Platform again. Looking at architecture and infrastructure, because it's a low-code platform, it looks much simpler, or at least your responsibility is much smaller. We start at the card development side. You use the Power Apps card designer to create your card. You build your card with the Power effects, etc., all in there. All your logic is in there. All the screens are in there. All the data fetching is in that card, just as it would be in a Canvas app. Then you publish this, and this will be transformed into the Power Apps data and resource management bot code and logic. It's a system provided by Microsoft. So once you publish this card, all of the Power effects, all of the UI will be translated by Microsoft in their backend system, and you don't have to do anything for it. This is the only responsibility that you have or the maker has is building the card in the card designer. The user itself does the same thing. They go through Teams, they do a request to Power Apps, or they get the card in the other direction. It goes through the whole flow, and it's the bot logic that's provided by Microsoft that will respond with your adaptive card, which will then be shown in Teams. All of the interactions between your card that has to go back into the bot logic backend service is handled by Microsoft. Okay? Cards for Power Apps have some advantages, of course. Again, higher user engagement. You can still use them for real-time information updates. They're customizable and visually appealing, but they are also easily integrated with Dataverse data and Dynamics 365 data. Everything that's on top of Dataverse or stored in Dataverse, you can easily expose inside a card for Power Apps, and it's created using a low-code platform. If you can build Canvas apps, you can most likely, probably, also build cards for Power Apps. Downsides, they're still rather complex and technically challenging, in my opinion. If you don't know how to build Canvas apps, this is still challenging. It's low code, but it might still be complex and challenging for you to create. Their performance is a bit more, well, you have less control over the performance with this one than you have with your own bot service backend. There's limited support across app versions, although currently I think it's kind of okay across platforms, macOS, iOS, Android, Windows, all of web. They can all support the cards for Power Apps at this point, but you still have the higher maintenance because it's something that you created, that you developed, and you have to treat it like any other software development that you've done, although, of course, it's still low code, so it might be less in that regard. Okay, so cards for Power Apps, what can they do and how do they work? Before you get started, cards for Power Apps require that your Dataverse region, well, they require that you have Dataverse. That's step one, because all of your cards are stored in a Dataverse table. And your Dataverse environment has to be in a specific region. Now, a lot of regions are already supported. You can see the list here. There are a couple that are not supported just yet, mainly other Go locals like France or others like that. And also the government clouds are not supported. So if your Dataverse region is in a government cloud, unfortunately, you can't use cards for Power Apps. With the caveat that this is based on the official Microsoft documentation, and I have not been able to test it in every single region, so I have to go with what the documentation states, which we all know is not always correct. You need Microsoft Teams either on desktop, mobile, or web, and it works across platforms. That's what you need to use cards for Power Apps. Cards for Power Apps building blocks. So how do you create such a card? You use the card designer. So when you want to build a card, this is how your card looks, or the designer looks. You see, it has a lot of similarities with the Canvas App Studio if you want to create a Canvas app. If you look on the left side, you get your main menu. Then you've got the tool pane with all the different controls that you can put on a card. In your main menu, you can switch between the tree view, which will show you all the controls that you have on your card. You can add additional controls on a card. You can connect with data, and you can create variables. It's one of the biggest differences between Canvas apps and cards for Power Apps. With Canvas apps, you can create your variables on the fly. You just do PowerFX, the set function, and you give it a name, and it will create the variable for you. Whereas with cards for Power Apps, you have to specifically create or like make available the variable, like initialize the variable to make sure that you can use it inside your PowerFX. In the middle, you've got your card itself. This is the canvas. This is where you build your card. And then on the right, you've got the property pane of the selected control, where you modify the properties of that control inside the card. And on top, you've got the formula bar. This is where you, like with Canvas apps, put in your PowerFX stuff. On the top right, you've got preview, test, troubleshoot, debug buttons. This is where you save your card, where you look at the JSON that will be generated, rendered by this card, in which it will be translated after you publish it. And you can play it so you get a running experience inside the Maker Studio, so you can see how the card behaves. You can use variables. You have to give it a name and you have to select the type. You can do text, number, record, date, table, and Boolean. You can give it a default value. You can say if it's a temporary value, like a temporary variable, or a permanent. With a temporary one, every time your card is rendered, every time the card is opened, it will be reset to the default value. If you make it permanent, then the value persists across different card sessions. That means that when you, well, I'll show you a demo later, but if you have a card that's rendered, you accept input and you store it in a variable, and it's a type permanent, then that will be available for every user that opens that card, and for every time you open that card, it will use a new value for that variable. Sender customization, it's a checkbox, and this is a change since a year ago. You can allow sender customization, and you can also decide if sender customization is required. Which means if this variable can be modified from outside. So before you send a card instance to Teams, you can inject your own value for a specific variable. This is super interesting if you, for example, want to render a specific record ID. You build the card once, you pass in the record ID, and it will fetch it on the fly from Dataverse and render the correct information. And then you've got some additional variable information. Their title and description are for debugging. They're hidden behind the dropdown. You don't have to fill them in. You could fill them in. It's very unclear where they are used. It just states that this information is used for debugging. I have not seen where it is used. And then allow value to be returned to flow or bot. No clue what this means. This exists there in the UI. There's no documentation on this, and I have not figured out what difference in behavior there is if this is checked or not. If anyone knows, I'd love to hear it as well. But in the official docs, there's nothing, and I haven't figured it out yet. Data connectors. You can connect to data from your card. If you look at the documentation, it states that only connections to Dataverse are currently available. You can connect to Dataverse tables to create, read, update, and delete records, and we are working on support for other connectors. And this is a screenshot that comes out of documentation. You think nice, something done well by Microsoft, very clear documentation. Now, if you go into the card builder, this is what you currently see in the card designer. You get 3 options for data sources, not just Dataverse, and there's no link anymore to see all connectors. So currently, it seems like you can use from a card the Office 365 Outlook connector, the Office 365 user connector on top of the Microsoft Dataverse connector. I tested them, they all 3 seem to work, which is a good thing. So this is probably a case where documentation is running behind of the actual implementation. It's a rare case, of course, we have never seen this before, and I'm sure that they will rectify this immediately now that I presented on this. And you can do business logic inside your card for Power Apps with Power FX. Now, the Power FX in cards for Power Apps and the Power FX in Canvas apps has the same name, but unfortunately is not the same thing. And I can only recommend that you read the documentation on top of this, because there are functions that are supported in Canvas apps that are not supported in cards for Power Apps. There are functions that have different parameters between Canvas apps and Power Apps. So there might be, your mileage may vary if you want to use certain functionality from Power FX in your cards for Power Apps. It has been a very frustrating experience for me to build the demos because of one of these things. Cards for Power Apps give you give you certain options for control. And one of the good things is that cards are solution aware, which is a good thing. So currently you can create cards for Power Apps and you can put them in a solution. Unfortunately, you can check dependencies and they are not properly shown. This means if you put a card in a solution and it depends on a table, then when you import it into an environment where the table is not already there, it will tell you that it cannot import it because of missing dependencies, but it will not tell you which dependencies are missing. It can't do that. The other way around, it can't do that either. If a card is dependent on a table and you delete or want to delete the table, it will tell you that it cannot delete the table because there is stuff depending on it, the card, but it cannot tell you that it is a card and which card it is. So it will just fail, say that there are dependencies or things depending on it, but it can't tell you what is depending on this table to be deleted first. Okay? There are security roles. There are 2 security roles. Cards basic role. This is the one that you assign to users if you want them to be able to build or edit or whatever with cards for Power Apps, because this is a security role that gives them the proper privileges on the cards table. If they do not have that, they cannot build cards or edit cards or use them. Cards role is a security role that's used internally by Microsoft only. You do not assign this to your users. Of course, you can create custom security roles or give the cards functionality to specific security roles that you use in your environment as well. Cards more or less support DLP policies because cards itself do not. Because there is no DLP policy that says that you cannot use specific connectors together in one Canvas app. You can't have that for cards either. And then additionally, the DLP policies are limited to the Power Automate flow because there's a action for cards for Power Apps that lives in a Power Automate flow, and that one can be added to a DLP policy. So if you have business and non-business, for example, then the connectors from both policies cannot be used together in one Power Automate flow. So you can do that for that specific cards for Power Apps Power Automate connector. If you want the card to be deleted, it can only be done by the card owner. This means it cannot be done by any admin roles. Admin roles like Global Admin, Microsoft Entra ID, Global Admin System Administrator, Dynamics 365 Admin, they cannot delete a card from the environment. It's a thing to remember. Usage in Microsoft Teams for cards for Power Apps. First of all, this is how a card is rendered when you do it yourself. There's the message information, so the one that posted the card, as usual. The URL for the card, because it has to be, you have to put it in the body of a message, and then it will render the card for you. It will show the app information, which will always be Power Apps currently, and it will render your card. So this is how it looks. The screenshot that Microsoft puts in their documentation does not show the URL. I have not found a way to make it do link unfurling, show the card, but not have the link itself in the body of the text. So this is how it works. You have to have the Power Apps app inside your team channel chat meeting to make this work. Then you can take the link to the card from the card designer and you can post it in Teams. And then it will render like this. You can also send it through Power Automate. In this way, you will have to use the Cards for Power Apps connector. You have to make a connection to your Dataverse. It will then give you a list of cards that are available for you inside that environment. And it will potentially show you all of the variables that allow sender customization turned on. In my case, record ID, and you can provide your own custom value for it. And then it will create a card instance for you. That card instance can then be posted as a card in a chat or channel, which is an action in Teams. If you want to use a card for Power App card and you want to post it in Teams, you have to post as Power Apps. And then you have the ability to get the dynamic output from create card instance, and you can post it in Teams. Other integration methods, other usage methods, computer says no. These cards are super interesting, but currently they're only supported in Teams. You cannot render them inside a model-driven app, inside a Canvas app, inside somewhere else, like, I don't know, all of the places that I showed you before where adaptive cards can be posted. iOS, Windows notifications, etc., etc. Cards for Power Apps can only be rendered inside Teams, which means there is a lot of room for improvement. There currently is no parity between player and Teams, which means if you build your card and you run it in debug mode, it might work, whereas it might fail when you post it inside Teams. Yes, Chris, everywhere that would make sense. Exactly. And for your parity between player and Teams, it means that you might be very surprised that your nice card works inside the player and then fails inside Teams. This is why my last demo took me 4 hours to build and not 30 minutes. There's no PowerFX parity between cards and Canvas apps, so I would love that to be there too. The IntelliSense inside a cards designer is very poor. It has been improved over the last year, but it's still super, super poor if you compare it with the IntelliSense that you get inside Canvas apps. I'd like more and better data connector support. We already got 3 at this point. I think we should be, or they think we should be happy, I guess, but it's, well, with 1,000+ connectors in Power Platform, I expect better in cards. I'd like better performance for more complex cards, and I'd like the ability to call a Power Automate flow from a card, because that's currently not possible either, which means there is potential everywhere. Currently, in my opinion, it falls short a little bit, depending on the use cases that you've got. It might still be interesting for you. I like it. I can see what it could do for all of these interesting applications or micro apps, but currently the limitations are there very, very quickly when you start building cards for Power Apps. And it has been a very frustrating experience for me to build all of these demos. I will have to be a bit faster in my demos. So first of all, let's see if I can make it bigger. It's not going bigger. There you go. So this is in the the maker portal. On the left side, you've got cards. If it's not there, you either don't have permissions to build one, or you have to go into the more overflow menu and find this. If you create cards in here, they're not in the solution. So I prefer to put them in the solution. You can add existing connectors or cards in the solution, or you can create them from a solution. You can do new card. It's very prominently featured as the third one. And as the fifth one, to edit an existing one into your solution. They will always show up as off, which is ridiculous because they will always work, but they're off. Very simple card. I will show you the, and now I've got issues. I will show you the ones in Teams first. So first of all, you see all my 4 cards in here. The first one that I created is a super simple one. I take the link that I got from the designer. I post it in here. It renders the card, and I can put in my name. And I can state my name. And as you can see, it will update the card like it will be sending it to the backend. It will return it. And it will, I have this variable in here that's submitted. Now, if I refresh this card or not, if I refresh this page, it should not store that because it's a temporary variable. And now it's not doing that. Amazing. So this is a simple one. There's another one that you can do. Like, I want to praise myself, of course, for this amazing session, because who else will do it? I'll better do it myself. And you can give praise, and then as a result, it will switch to a separate screen, and it will create this rather ugly UI, but you see you can have a background image and then text, which has variables in here that you have provided, and it will render that inside the card. Now, normally, this should go to the first screen again, which it doesn't at this time, but okay. The third one that I created is one that sends an email, because it uses the send email connector as well as the user, like the Office 365 users connector, to get my full name, my job title, and my company. And then I can send an email to my other email address. Good job. I want to thank you. And then you can send an email. Your email has been sent successfully, and you can return here, and then you can send a new email. So all of this is possible because all of that is built in inside of that card. All those connectors are there. And this is also one, this is a very useless card that I created. It's a counter card, which means it will just count the number of clicks on this button and who has last done it. Both of these are like permanent variables, so it will store it, and as other users open this card, they will see the same information. So it will just count more. Looking at those cards. If we look at the designer, you can see that for this card, which is a super simple one, we have a label that uses a variable. We have a text input field that's named user answer that has some placeholders. And then we have a button that does not much but set the username variable with the value of user answer, which is the text field. It has no data, but it does have variables. As you can see, it has variables in here, name, which you cannot change afterwards. So once a variable has a name, this is the name. You can't change it. You can do the type and then temporary, and there's no customization for this one. Let's go. Yeah, yes. The praise card is a bit different. Shit, I want to do the other demo as well. It's a bit different. It has two fields, as you can see in the screens. It has a main screen and the praise screen. And if you do give praise, it will set both variables and it will navigate to a separate screen. Same goes here. that's not in here, but essentially it will just use the variables on here. Send an email. This is the one where it becomes a bit more complex because I will use onload. I will use the Office 365 connector to select my user profile from the user that's logged in, the AAD object, so fetch my data, only keep the display name, job title, and company name, and store it inside the user info, which is a variable that is a record. So it's a record, and I have said that the structure for this record is based on this default value. Still temporarily, but then you can use that variable to find the display name, the job title, and the company name, and you can put it in here. Sending the email is the same thing. I use the connector for Office 365 Outlook, send the email, use target mail, subject mail, and body, those 3 fields, and then I navigate to the success screen. In data, you see that I have a connection to Office 365 Outlook and users. Now, the other one, the counter card, I will not show because I want to show the comment card. And this is the last one that I created because this is the one where it goes with Dynamics 365. You see, I have this system where comments on my blog are added into this Dataverse table. Like, you bear with me, this is what we do. So once I create a new comment in here, let's do Chris. Chris likes me. I like you. What a good session. Learned tons. There it goes. If we save and close this, this will, you see, I have to approve this first so that it's unapproved. This will kick off a Power Automate flow, hopefully quickly. But I will show you first what it does. It will create, so when a row is added or modified, it will take the card instance, my comment card, and it will put in this record ID. This will output my card from Power Platform, which I can then post in a chat or in a channel. Once I do that, this worked. You see this new comment is here with all of the information available, and the status is not there yet. And then I can approve or reject. I don't like Chris, so I reject this comment. So there it goes. You see, it updates this inside Dataverse. So it goes in here, rejected. And you can see that it also refreshes the card. The way to make this work is, first of all, on refresh, which is when you're, and this is also a bug, you have to switch to this and then back to this. And then there's your power effect that magically shows up. You see that once this card loads or refreshes, I will set the comment record, which is a record, a variable, and I will look up from block comments, which is my table, the block comment with the specific GUID from the record ID that is provided by Power Automate. I will get that row. I will keep certain columns from it, and I will set that on the comment record. Once I do that, I can use that comment record and show all that information inside the table or inside the card. You can see here that this record ID variable has been set up as text, but it's permanent. And this is probably pretty important. This is what stumped me for a long time when building this demo. If you send from Dataverse, you most likely want to provide a value to the card that is used every time that this card is rendered in Teams. So you have to set it as permanent. If you don't do that, the whole thing fails. Okay? Comment record, this is where all of the structure is for a specific comment. The easiest way to make sure that your IntelliSense works is to look up one specific, like default value, look up one specific comment and show the same columns. That will make all of your IntelliSense work. Also, this is the one that's used when your card is rendered for the first time. If your card is not rendered, if your card is rendering empty, it means that you do not have a default value for this comment record, because this refresh value is only called when you do the refresh on this card and not when loading the card for the first time. Another thing I learned when creating this solution. You can see there's this connection to Dataverse that I want to keep, and then all of the structure is in there. The buttons itself, nothing more than some power effect that will update that same comment record, and it will set the reset the comment record variable to the new approval state. So it will fetch it again so that it can be re-rendered on the page. Okay, quickly back, because I'm running over time. Quickly back to the presentation, wrap up. So cards for Power Apps, they're visually appealing, they have increased user interaction, they're highly customizable, and they're consistent across host, platform, and devices, but they're rather technical. They're built on the foundations of Canvas apps. They have a high degree of integration with first and third-party systems. They're infinitely scalable, and there are some attention points. It is generally available, but with all of the downsides of this thing, I'm not so sure about that, and it's lacking lots of data connector support. So that's my opinion. This is the one that I had last year, because then it was in preview. Now the thing is only a year old and is only has been out of preview, generally available for 6 months. So I'm saying that it's still very early in the development cycle. The problem with this for a little bit is that I have not seen any improvements since it became GA, except for the 2 extra connectors that are available. So it brings me to the end. Please rate my session. Make sure that you attend all the other sessions, show your love on Twitter and all of the other socials, and provide your feedback, because I love this event and I like to get back here next year when they do it again. Of course, you'll do it again, Chris, I'm sure. And this is me again. Are there any questions? Let's see in chat.
I got one for you, Yannick. How you doing, man? It's Chris.
Hi, Chris.
So what is the biggest difference you see between these and using like the Power Automate generated cards that you use JSON to build? Is it just more of simplicity of building it? It kind of looks like you can get quicker output refreshes, I guess, data-wise, versus doing everything through Flow. But
yeah, and your Power Automate cards, they're way simpler in a way that if you could do the same thing with Power Automate in a way that you send your card with the fixed data in there. You can have buttons in there that call your flow, and then the flow will regenerate a new card, and then you will replace the message and the card inside the message with your new data, essentially, with your new card. Now, the difference here is that in a way that if we would do that for my demo for block comments, it would mean that every time the record is updated in Dataverse, your flow has to run and update the every message that has been sent for that specific record to get the new values in there. Because sending the card through Power Automate will be static data. It will be data of that point in time. Whereas if you use cards for Power Apps, you can do the Dataverse connection, and every time that you reload the page, the card will be updated. So in my simple demo, if I would go here and I change this one to I don't like you, now it will repost this because this is how my flow is set up. Right. But essentially, if I switch this, but there's some caching. So you see, this is a new one.
Yeah, I saw it update. Yeah, that's definitely huge. Yeah, I see that.
So it will now. This is a new post, so this is already the new information. But this one is updated now. This one as well is fetching the data on the fly when it's loading. So you could ignore this one because this is just a new post, because that's how my Power Automate flow is set up. It might be easier if I disable this. Is it doing something? Anyways, so it's turned off. You will see that all of the instances of this card are updated, but it might take a while because there's caching in there. So see, it's not updated yet. I'm not sure if it will automatically, or if you have to be patient and reload this, and then it will fetch it. But it will fetch it on the fly, essentially. You can see this one is updated.
Yep.
This one is not yet. So it might be like there's a bit of delay on it, but it's fetching this on the fly. So this is way closer to having your own backend system for cards with bot framework, stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's more like an app window ish
Exactly.
versus a static, JSON thing that requires an action to update. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
exactly.
it.
So it's a micro app, essentially.
Yep.
Okay, back to PowerPoint. Any other questions? There was one in the chat. Is it possible to patch data to SharePoint using the card? Nope, unfortunately not, because there is no SharePoint connector available and there's no HTTP connector available, so you cannot do your own stuff there. And then you say, do I need to get the values and then use Power Automate to do that? Yeah, that would be a great way of doing it, but unfortunately, you cannot start a Power Automate flow from a card either. So essentially, if it's not in the connectors currently, it will not work.
Yeah, you could do a Dataverse trigger to go to SharePoint.
Yeah,
that kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, like we have all the premium connectors in the world and the premium licensing to save it to Dataverse, and then we will save it to Dataverse, start a Power Automate flow on a record is modified in Dataverse, and then post it to SharePoint. Probably you want to stay in Dataverse then. Anyways, yeah. Okay. To give time to the next presenter, I'm gonna stop sharing. If there are any more questions, I'm here still. You can post them in chat. Otherwise, reach out to my contact details that you've got before. And thank you very much for attending.